Their names were Michael Lapp and Janet Cornell. He was 16, she was 19. And for 10 years, neither of them told anybody anything. Not a parent, not a friend. No report to anyone, ever. Not each other. 2 teenagers. One afternoon. 10 years of silence. Why does that silence weigh more than anything either of them eventually said? Because when a man finally went looking separately, in 2 different cities, months apart, he came back with 2 statements that should not have matched. There is a dock on Lake Champlain in Vermont, built for a camp full of 400 girls. On the afternoon of August 7th, 1968, there are 2 people on it. Everyone else has gone to a swim meet in Burlington. The cabins are empty, the paths are empty, the water is empty, and the sun is going down. They both see the light. Buff Ledge was a private girls' camp north of Burlington. Michael was maintenance. Janet taught water skiing. That Wednesday, they were the 2 left behind, sitting on the boards with nothing to do, in the one stretch of the whole summer when that place belonged to nobody. Michael thought the light was Venus. That is the first thing on the record from this witness. Not awe. A correct, boring astronomical identification. Venus is what you see at that hour, in that direction, over that lake, in August. The light did not behave like Venus. It descended, and as it descended, it opened. Out of one elongated object, cigar-shaped, is the word in the file, came 3 smaller ones. 3, not 1, 3. Zigzags and loops, then a descent Michael described as a leaf coming off a tree that side-to-side rocking, losing height without dropping. 2 of them formed a triangle with the 3rd and pulled back. And when they pulled back, there was a sound. I want to stay on that sound, because it is the strangest piece of language in the whole file, and almost nobody stops on it. Michael said it was like 1,000 tuning forks. Think about what he is not saying. Not a hum, not a whine, not a roar, not a thrum. None of the words a person reaches for when a machine is loud. Not an engine, which is what a boy who fixed things for a living would have said if he had heard an engine. A tuning fork has no attack, no bang at the front of it, no ignition. You strike it and you get a pure tone, sustained, with almost nothing else inside it. The cleanest sound most people ever encounter, and one most people meet in exactly one place. A school music room. So the boy reached into a music room to describe something over a lake. And he did not say 1, he said 1,000, which is a different object entirely pure tones at once, not tuned to each other, not making a chord, just clean frequencies stacked in the same air. That is not a noise, that is closer to a texture. It is what you would get if a sound had no source you could point at. I do not know what makes that. I know that if you were inventing an alien craft in 1968, you would have said it hummed. The one that stayed came toward the dock. It had a dome. Inside the dome, 2 figures. Large heads, long necks, dark eyes that wrapped around the face. The heads first. Large against what? Michael never gives a measurement, he gives a proportion. The heads were large against the bodies, and the bodies were no taller than he was. Probably shorter. Not 4 feet, not 5 shorter than me, said a boy who knew his own height to the inch. Real observation measures against the only ruler in the room, which is your own body, then the necks. And the necks are what I keep going back to. Because the figure everybody now has in their head, the one on paperback covers and film posters for 40 years, does not have a neck worth mentioning. That image is a head and eyes. The neck is not in the picture, and it was not in the picture in 1978 either, when Michael first said this out loud. He said the necks were long. That detail has no cultural home. It does not make them scarier. It does no work in the story. It does not match the template he supposedly copied. It just sits there in the middle of the description, being inconvenient. And then, the eyes, which is where his language breaks down. Dark, he said, and they wrapped around the face. Wraparound is a mechanical word. Sunglasses, windshields, safety goggles. It is the vocabulary of a kid in maintenance reaching for the nearest shape in a hardware world, and it tells you something precise. He was not describing two eyes on a face. He was describing a continuous surface that went around a curve and kept going, with no edge where the eye stopped and the head began, and dark. Not dark the way eyes are dark and they still catch a light. There is a wet shine on a human eye, always, in the worst light in the world. That shine is how you know you are looking at something alive. Dark, in his account, meant something else. Dark like a surface that gives nothing back. He did not have words for that. He was 16. Nobody has words for that. What he had was a pair of goggles and the flat, useless adjective dark, and that poverty is worth more than fluency. Fluent descriptions come from people who have had time to build them. Then a sentence arrived inside his head. He repeated it word for word, 10 years later. "We are not here to hurt you." And then this. Michael, sitting on a plank with a glowing object hanging off the end of the dock, did what a 16-year-old does when his body overflows and there is nowhere to put it. He slapped his knee, and one of the figures slapped its knee. That is the detail I have not been able to put down. Nobody building a lie puts that in. It is a stupid, involuntary adolescent gesture with no dramatic weight. It goes nowhere. It is not scary, and it is not beautiful. It is noise, and lies do not carry noise. Lies are clean. After that, the account has a hole in it, a beam of light. Then nothing. The next thing either of them consciously remembers is waking on that dock to the sound of the camp coming back buses, 40 girls coming down the path, and something over the lake flashing before it was gone. They agreed to say nothing. Michael was leaving in a few days, going home to Burlington for football practice. Janet went her own way. The summer ended, the job ended, that was it. And that is where the case actually starts. Between August of 1968 and October of 1978, there is no file. There was nothing to put in one. No police report, no letter to a magazine, nobody in the back row at a club for enthusiasts. 10 years. Michael finished high school. Janet turned 20, 21, 22. Neither went looking for the other. But one of them started having a dream, always the same one, that he was being taken and that he did not want to go. Here is the asymmetry that reorganizes everything. Michael had something following him around. Janet had nothing at all. When Webb eventually found her, and finding her took work, because she had not come forward, had not called anybody, did not know a case existed, she had no memory of anything unusual that night. She was not hiding it. She did not have it. So think about what that does to the hoax. If two teenagers cooked up a story in 1968, why did one of them forget cooking it? The call came on October 31st, 1978, Halloween, a Tuesday. Walter Webb was a senior lecturer at the Charles Hayden Planetarium in Boston, an astronomer, a man who made his living explaining the sky to school children, and he did not believe a word of it. He wrote it himself, later. The account contained nearly every element of the phenomenon ever reported. Lights, a larger craft, smaller disks, communication without sound, missing time, and examination. Too good to be true, his words. A stranger calling 10 years late, on Halloween, with the perfect story. It took him 5 years to stop thinking that. And what changed his mind was not the story. It was the shape of how it reached him. In any field that runs on testimony, the central problem is contamination. Witnesses talk. They correct each other. They lend each other details. One version goes dominant, and the other quietly aligns to it, almost always without anybody lying on purpose. Two people who go over the same night 20 times do not end up with two memories. They end up with one. Michael and Janet went over nothing. Not out of discipline, they just did not see each other. One went off to football practice, the other got on with her life, and there was no reason on earth to pick up a phone. So without intending it, without anyone designing it, those two kids spent a decade under conditions no investigator could have arranged on purpose. Nobody built that control. They were it. And here's the strangest part of the investigation. Webb did not start with hypnosis. He started by going out to find the second witness. That order matters enormously, and almost nobody mentions it. Before proposing any technique, he went looking for Janet Cornell to verify the account of a man he did not believe. He did not stop there. 5 years on that shoreline, he found other camp employees who had seen strange lights over the lake the same night. 2 more who, another time that summer, watched objects over the water for about 20 minutes, and 2 people who told him they thought it had happened to them as well. Now the part I approach most carefully, because this is the part that comes out of hypnosis. Under regression, separately, with no contact between them, both described what came after the beam of light. Michael, an interior, curved walls, small figures, no taller than he was, a table, and Janet on another table, in view. Janet, cold, a cold table, being pulled at by the hair, as if somebody wanted to find out what it was, a pinching sensation at the neck. She did not know he had seen her. He did not know she remembered the hair. There is one more line. When Michael asked what they were doing here, what came back was that they were obtaining some kind of energy and that their work was to make life like ours in other places. Not an invasion, not a warning, not a message for humanity, nothing anybody would put on a poster, a logistical task. Of everything in this file, that is the piece that least resembles what a 16-year-old from Vermont invents in 1968. It sounds like someone describing a shift, which brings me back to the empty camp, because I cannot get past it. Why that afternoon? One swim meet, in an 8-week summer. The single window in which that dock did not have 40 witnesses standing on it. Empty. I keep coming back to that word, and it reads 2 ways. 1. Coincidence. It fell on the afternoon, almost nobody was there, and that is why the case has 2 witnesses instead of 200. The other reading is worse. That the emptiness was a condition. That whatever occurred out there required a place without people in it, and that something knew when that place would be without people. I am not saying that is true. I am asking whether it could be, because if it could, the question stops being what Michael and Janet saw and becomes how many empty afternoons there were on that shoreline and who was standing on the dock for the others. Now, I have to sit on the other side of the table, because if I do not, none of this is worth anything. Hypnotic regression does not recover memory. The research is fairly clear that the hypnotic state raises a subject's confidence without raising accuracy and raises suggestibility to whatever the questioner implies. The psychologist, Susan Clancy, would later argue that most of this material comes from sleep paralysis, suggestion, and a cultural framework sitting there ready to be picked up. And by 1978, that framework was available. 12 years since the book about the hills, a decade of films that fixed the imagery. Then the hard one. Webb came out of the Hill case. He was the investigator who interviewed Betty and Barney Hill in 1961. So the man who validates Buff Ledge is the same man who stood at the birth of the template. His critics do not have to accuse him of lying. They only have to point out that he knew exactly what shape the story had before he went looking for it. There is no clock in this case either. Nobody looked at a watch. I cannot give you the arithmetic left at 9:30, home at 3, because it does not exist. And the last one, which costs Webb the most. Michael Lapp is not called Michael Lapp. Janet Cornell is not called Janet Cornell. Those are pseudonyms Webb printed to protect 2 people who did not want to be found, which means the best documented case in its category is also, by design, one you cannot independently check. You can read 306 pages of verbatim transcripts and never reach the person who sat in that chair. That is a real hole, and I am not going to paper over it. But look at what it cost them. Decades on, the woman behind the name Janet still will not talk about it publicly. Never gave a talk, never took a fee, never showed her face. When somebody invents something for attention, the next move is to collect the attention. Here, the next move was to disappear and stay disappeared for 50 years. So, split the file, because it does not all weigh the same. Before any hypnosis, Michael's memory of the lights held 10 years. His drawing, the dream. A second witness, Webb, located without her ever coming forward. Other camp employees, interviewed by ordinary means, who saw strange things over that lake. Only under hypnosis. The interior, the tables, the examination, the line about energy, the entire last third. That is the weak joint. That is where it breaks, if it breaks. And yet there is one fact the suggestion argument does not touch. Suggestion explains why two hypnotized people might produce similar material if they share a culture and a hypnotist. It has a much harder time explaining why two people who had not spoken in 10 years describe, separately, the same afternoon on the same dock with the same sequence of lights when one of them did not know there was anything there to remember. Suggestion can write a script. Writing two identical copies of it in 2 rooms a decade apart is a different problem. Webb, published in 1994 with Hynek Center for UFO Studies. The whole method laid open, including the parts that did not help him. It is hard to find now, and very few people have read it. The best documented case in its category is also one of the least famous. That says something too, though I am not sure what. I have looked at the drawing Michael made from that dock. I have thought about the slap on the knee, and about a boy reaching into a school music room for 1,000 tuning forks, and about eyes that were dark the way a surface is dark. I am not prepared to tell you that 2 teenagers were taken off a dock in Vermont in August of 1968. I am not prepared to tell you that hypnotic regression recovered anything real. And I am certainly not prepared to tell you that a camp emptied out that afternoon for any reason other than a swimming schedule in Burlington. But I am not prepared to dismiss it either, and the reason is narrow. 2 people who agree on a story have to keep agreeing. A story invented by 2 people is not a memory, it is a rehearsal, and rehearsals decay. Without review, without contact, without correcting each other, 2 versions of a lie drift apart. 10 years of silence should have opened a canyon between those 2 statements. Coincidences narrow with time. Corroborations do not. What Webb had on that table had not narrowed. Buff Ledge is gone. The camp closed. Most of the cabins were pulled down, and the land is an equine community now. There are horses where there were girls. The plank dock was taken up and replaced with a smaller one. But the shoreline is still there, and the lake is still there. And in August, the sun still goes down over the same patch of water that a 16-year-old boy and a 19-year-old girl were looking at on a Wednesday afternoon, in a place built never to be empty. I don't know what came out of that lake. I'm not sure the 2 of them ever did either.